The roar of the crowd was deafening. The air smelled of burning rubber and adrenaline, the kind of electric atmosphere that only a high-stakes race could create. The sun was just beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the track. Every eye in the stadium was locked on the riders at the starting line, but one figure stood out among them, not just because of his talent, but because of what he represented. He adjusted his gloves, rolled his shoulders, and took a deep breath. This wasn't just any race for him. It was the race. The one that would prove, once and for all, that he belonged here. That he deserved the same respect as every other competitor on this track. That his strength wasn't just in his speed, but in his ability to push past the doubts, the whispers, the endless obstacles thrown in his path. For years, he had fought for his place in this sport. Motorcycling had always been his passion, his escape. As a kid, he used to race down the dusty back roads near his home, feeling the wind whip against his face, dreaming of the day he'd be on a real track, in front of real crowds, competing with the best. But dreams don't come easy when the world keeps telling you they're not meant for you. He had heard it all before, that he was too different, that this sport wasn't for people like him, that no matter how fast he was, he'd never be accepted. But he never let that stop him. Every setback only fueled his determination. Every doubt only made him train harder. He had worked his way up from underground races, proving himself on the streets before finally getting a shot at the professional level. And now here he was, on the biggest stage of his career, facing not just the best riders in the game, but also the weight of history on his shoulders. The announcer's voice boomed over the speakers, introducing the competitors. His name was called, and a mix of cheers and murmurs rippled through the crowd. He could feel the eyes on him, some filled with admiration, others with skepticism. He didn't care. He had one job tonight, to ride like his life depended on it. His biggest rival, a seasoned champion with more titles than he could count, pulled up beside him. The man smirked, tapping the side of his helmet. "Hope you can keep up," he said, his voice laced with arrogance. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. The engines revved, the lights on the track flickered from red to yellow, then green. They were off. Instantly, the world blurred around him. The wind howled in his ears as he leaned into the first curve, tires gripping the asphalt like his life depended on it. He was fast, faster than he had ever been. But so were they. The riders jostled for position, weaving in and out, pushing their limits. His rival was right beside him, matching his every move. The two of them were locked in a battle, neither willing to give an inch. The crowd was on their feet, watching history unfold before their eyes. Then it happened. A sharp turn, a moment of hesitation. A split-second decision that could mean the difference between victory and disaster. And just like that, the race took a turn no one saw coming. The back wheel skidded for just a fraction of a second, just enough to send a jolt of panic through his body. But he didn't let it take over. His instincts kicked in, hands tightening on the handlebars as he adjusted his balance, keeping the bike steady. But in that moment of hesitation, his rival took advantage. The champion leaned into the turn with the precision of someone who had done it 1,000 times before, slicing past him effortlessly. The gap between them widened, and for a split second, doubt crept in. Was this it? Was this the moment they'd all been waiting for? The moment he failed? The moment they could all say, "We told you so"? No, not tonight. He pushed the bike harder, forcing himself to forget everything except the road ahead. The roar of the crowd faded into the background. The lights, the cameras, the pressure, none of it mattered. It was just him and the machine, moving as one. He had worked too hard, sacrificed too much to let it slip away now. He could still hear the voices of his past, Coaches who had told him he wasn't ready, competitors who had dismissed him, even sponsors who had passed him over. They all had the same excuse. It's not about talent. It's just the way things are. But he never accepted that answer. His journey had been different from most. Others had the luxury of growing up in racing families, with access to the best training, the best bikes, the best connections. He had none of that. He had to fight for every opportunity, work twice as hard just to get noticed. And even then, it was never enough. Doors closed in his face before he even had a chance to prove himself. So he made his own way. Street races, underground circuits, small competitions where no one cared about names or sponsorships, only speed. It was there that he earned his reputation, not just as a rider, but as someone who refused to back down. It was those late nights, those scraped knees and near misses, that had made him into the competitor he was today. And right now, all of that was about to pay off. The final stretch was coming up, and his rival was still ahead. But not by much. He could see the slight stiffness in the champion's shoulders, the tiny shifts in his body language that told him one thing: he was getting nervous. He wasn't supposed to be this close. The champion had expected an easy win, like all the others before it. But this wasn't like before. He made his move. Gritting his teeth, he leaned forward, twisting the throttle with everything he had. The bike surged forward, the engine screaming as he closed the gap inch by inch. His heart pounded in his chest, but his mind was clear. One more turn. One more chance. They were side by side now, the finish line just seconds away. The crowd was in chaos, people shouting, cameras flashing, commentators losing their minds. This was it. Everything had led to this moment. And then something happened that no one saw coming. The champion veered slightly to the left, a move so subtle that most wouldn't have even noticed. But he did, because it wasn't just a mistake. It was intentional. A desperate move to push him off course. His front wheel wobbled as he fought to regain control. If he braked now, he would lose. If he pushed forward recklessly, he could crash. The whole world seemed to slow down. He had a split second to decide. Would he let them take this from him? The answer was clear. He made his choice. And in that moment, the entire stadium held its breath. Time slowed as he fought to keep control. The champion's move had been deliberate, a final, desperate attempt to push him out of the way. But he wasn't going down that easy. With pure instinct, he shifted his weight, counteracting the force that threatened to send him flying off the track. His back tire wobbled for half a second, just half a second, but it was enough for gas to ripple through the stadium. But he didn't fall. Instead, he found an opening. The champion had leaned too far into his own move, thrown off balance just enough for a split-second hesitation. And that was all he needed. He twisted the throttle, surged ahead, and shot past him just inches from the finish line. The checkered flag waved. The race was over. For a moment, he didn't react. He barely registered the explosion of noise from the stands, the flashing lights, the chaos all around him. It was only when he looked up at the massive screen, saw his name at the top, saw the final result, first place, that it hit him. He had won. He let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. His hand shook as he pulled off his helmet, the cool night air hitting his face. He glanced over at his rival, who sat frozen on his bike, staring at the scoreboard in disbelief. The champion had lost. And not because of luck or chance or anything else. He had lost because, for the first time, he had been beaten fair and square. A mix of emotions flickered across his rival's face: frustration, disbelief, maybe even a little respect. But he didn't say a word. Instead, He revved his engine, turned, and disappeared down the track. The cameras swarmed him now, reporters pushing forward, shoving microphones in his face. Questions came at him from every direction. How does it feel to make history tonight? Did you expect to win? What do you say to those who doubted you? But he didn't need to answer. Not with words. The race had already spoken for him. Instead, he looked out into the crowd, scanning the faces until he found the one that mattered most. His mother. She was standing in the front row, hands clasped over her mouth, eyes shining with tears. She had been there since the beginning, through every setback, every rejection, every moment he had wanted to give up. She had told him, over and over, that he was meant for something greater. And now, finally, he had proved her right. The weight of everything hit him at once. The years of struggle, the endless battles, the fight to be seen, to be respected. It was over now, and he had won. Not just the race, but everything. As the crowd roared, as his team rushed to embrace him, as the world finally saw what he had always known, he smiled. Because tonight wasn't just about victory. It was about proving, once and for all, that he belonged.